Welcome to Dark Days Radio presents Darkhammer, a Worlds of Warhammer podcast, looking at the Warhammer RPGs for Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and of course, Warhammer 40,000. I'm one of the regular hosts, Chris, and again, I'm joined by Mike. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Yeah, really excited for a Darkhammer episode today. We're going to be talking some more about Chaos Gods, and today it's Nurgle. So, pretty interesting stuff.
Good
but
old
Chris, before we
Pappy, yeah.
before we get into the epicness of another one of the Chaos Gods in the Warhammer universes, let's talk about a little game update, Chris. What have you been doing for gaming lately, or construction?
Absolute fuck all. I've done no gaming. No, I think since last time. Let's be fair. I think maybe. I mean, if I look at what's on my painting table, let's do that first. I've got my Orlok Outriders, on their little quads. I need to finish painting.
Oh yeah.
And I've got partly painted my what are they called? It's not even Warhammer based. It's my Signar Warjack battle group. They're looking pretty good. It's all contrast paints and contrast paints for the metal to do the metal shading. So
yeah.
It's quite quaint being back painting those. But that's basically it, because my kitchen has been ripped out and is going to be reinstalled as of Monday, meaning that will be my hobby. My wargaming table will be back in there once everything's nice and sorted, but it'll be in a nice. clean, well-lit kitchen, which is it might make it really good for some streamed games of something in future, because it'll be such a nice. I've already spoken to Rob about this. It'd be kind of nice, like this kind of I don't know, coffee and gaming kind of vibe, rather than this ridiculous setup that people have. Just have it almost how people actually game. That would be shocking. But that's about it. How about yourself? You up to anything interesting game wise?
Not so much for Warhammer or miniature stuff. Haven't done any wargaming lately, but I was playing this game called Hearts of Iron 4, and there's a Reunification Wars mod. It's very early beta, but it's set in kind of the precursor to the Horus Heresy, and it's pretty interesting, pretty fun. And I rolled up a Nurgle nation to try to play as, and it didn't go so well once I turned to Chaos. The mechanics are pretty brutal, so I'm trying to talk to the devs about that a little bit, see if they can readjust things. But it was still pretty interesting, and I didn't make it quite towards where the Emperor was in the Himalayas, but I was getting close before things went south.
That reminds me, because now I've got my new streaming gaming, kind of productivity PC. I really need to install on their Total War Warhammer, and actually then buy the new ones, because it is enjoyable. I mean, I don't know how easy is it to play that online with a group of players. I mean, it kind of means you're going to have to meet up to run the battles, unless you allow the computer to auto simulate the conflicts.
Yeah, I think everyone's supposed to be there. I've never tried to do multiplayer, but if everyone is sitting there going through the game, it has a lot of downtime. It could definitely take a while. So you need to block out a lot of time or multiple sessions to get through a campaign. But it seems pretty awesome.
I mean, the other thing we could always look at as well is Chaos in the Old World through Tabletop Simulator. That would be fun.
Yeah, that game's awesome. And really in keeping with the theme of these last couple Darkhammer episodes.
Oh, yeah,
so that'd be awesome to do on Twitch sometime. Yeah, let's look into it. But I think that's it for a game update, right? So let's go on to some gaming news, because there's been a lot of epic stuff.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff out. So let's go through, kind of keep with the Cubicle 7 releases. And I'm just going to look it up so I can actually read the full spiel of the latest releases, because one of them I've not read yet. That's out. I've bought it and downloaded it. I've just not had the time to read it. It's really bad. Anyway, so Sea of Claws is out for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So I'll read the synopsis that's on the Cubicle 7 website, which is, to the north lies the bitterly cold and tempestuous Sea of Claws. The sea separates the Empire from the lands of Norsca, where marauder tribes beseech the forces of chaos, on topic, for glory and power, and vast monsters make their lairs in the fjords. The coastal provinces of the Empire, desperate to escape the stranglehold of Marienburg, scramble to construct mighty navies and sea defences. Sailors, explorers, pirates, and wreckers all rub their hands in thought of the wealth to be won. But whilst a life on the ocean waves can reap great rewards, the risks are greater still. So basically, this is our pirate book for Warhammer. It's going to give us a look at the coasts of the Sea of Claws, the marches of Caron. So that must be north of that's the northern coastline of Bretonia.
Yep.
The blighted shores of the Troll Country and the frozen territory of the Bjornlings. A guide to manning an ocean-going vessel, ship-to-ship combat, and the approaches to trade. Bestiary of sea creatures, and from the diminutive Gimcrab to the colossal black leviathan. Is the Gimcrab, kind of like a call to the Age of Sigmar crab creature that's in Underworlds?
It might be in the old Man of War game. There was a whole bunch of like sea creatures that you could deal with. And there's also a pretty cool Man of War video game where you can be attacked by a giant shark like a megalodon and other things, which is pretty neat. But this book sounds awesome. It's pirates versus Vikings.
There's even more. There's a new seafarer class, so there's like more careers for that. Rules for events, endeavors, mostly like how to deal with long sea journeys. So again, random tables to generate loot and treasure and locations, information on the cult of Manan and the worship of Stromfels. So that's interesting. Some more gods that we can look at. And famed seafarers such as the Arch Sea Lord Vrisk Ironscratch, Wulfric the Wanderer, Yargo Roth, and Longdrong provide profiles of these great sea. So we've got profiles of those captains and how they might influence adventures. You know what? This just sounds like we need to do a one-shot of piracy on the high seas with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. That would be a fun stream game.
Totally, I'm in.
Just you're the crew. Go find some treasure or go something.
Remember Orcs on Tour? Just use that kind of randomization thing.
Fun.
Yep.
Yeah. The other big thing, I don't know if we mentioned it last time. Did we mention Imperium Maledictum? I can't remember.
We did not. I don't know what this is, but based on the description right here, I'm incredibly excited.
Okay, so Imperium Maledictum is a percentile system. So it's derived from current Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. 40k. It's a Warhammer 40,000 RPG using the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition system as its basis, as its starting point. So it is essentially looking at low-level characters, and when I say low-level characters, they're what we would consider our tier 1 type characters in Wrath and Glory, and that is essentially what you'll be playing. So this is really the modern equivalent to Dark Heresy, because you're not going to play Space Marines using this system, because when you get to those upper echelons of ability and power and weaponry, the system it's always been acknowledged creaks, and it just doesn't flow as it should do. And also, when you get to that kind of level of combat, that amount of combat, again, the system isn't rapid enough compared to Wrath and Glory. So this game is much more intrigue focused, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think actually acknowledging that two systems deal with different aspects of the 40,000 universe better is a perfectly fine thing. I still think Wrath and Glory you could. So I would still say if you want to do intrigue and that type of thing with Wrath and Glory, you can still do that. But that's a toolkit which allows you to go. You've got your intrigue, and then suddenly it spirals off into high octane adventure. Necromunda levels of violence going on. But I think Imperium Maledictum is really the system I would perhaps reach to if I wanted to replicate the Warhammer TV series Interrogator that's currently on Warhammer TV and is fantastic to watch. So this is great, and the artwork already looks
Yeah.
fantastic. It's the same artists that we've seen work on Wrath and Glory, so yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because when we see a lot of these game systems that end up having two systems, usually one version is just like the simplified system, basically. That's what we saw with Exalted Essence. That's what we've seen with Shadowrun Anarchy. Or in the case of Legend of the Five Rings, it has its unique system with the custom dice, but also they just did a fifth edition version, right?
Yeah,
5e.
there's always a 5e version somewhere.
Right. But seeing Cubicle 7 put out a version of this which uses Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition and also calls back to, again, the Fantasy Flight and I guess Green Ronin era of Warhammer Roleplay, Warhammer 40,000 Roleplay. I think that's a great decision, and I think it's going to get a lot of people really excited about this. And I'm sure eventually someone's going to make a mod for or some hack to have Space Marines in Imperium Maledictum, but
but I think
so if you want that, someone's going to make it. Don't worry.
Again, it's about. I think it comes back to the thing of like I think I'm very much a system. System matters as to how the game feels and operates and how that relates to the tone. So yeah, it'll be good. Then the thing I cannot wait for it to be out. Is the Ulfenkhan, City at the Edge of Death. That is for Soulbound. So this is the city book, setting book for Age of Sigmar Soulbound, which is set in Ulfenkhan, which of course is the city for the setting of Warhammer Quest Cursed City. So it means there's vampires, there's undead. We're going to find out all about that and all about the various cursed people that live there, like the Vicross, which is the main bloodline of vampires there. And the artwork's really interesting that they've showcased for this. We've got artwork of an elven exile, a last scion, so a human from the city, like a noble, and a Shaishan scholar. And what's interesting about this artwork is they are gender flipped versions of the signature characters that you play as in Cursed City. So the Elven Exile is male, when the Elven Exile that you have in the game is a female character. Same with the Last Scion. This is a female interpretation, whereas the model we have is male, and the same with the Shaishin Scholar. The artwork is that we've been shown is female, whereas the one we have in the game is a male. It's like some old dude, basically. So I think that's a really good touch from Cubicle 7 on the artwork there.
Cool.
And yeah, more archetypes for Soulbound. Playing like vampire hunters and so forth, and just more stuff to do with the Realm of Death. That's just going to be great. And especially because there's an expansion set coming out for Cursed City now, so that's been previewed, which has no miniatures in it. And I know this has caused a bit of a fuss with some people, but given how many miniatures are out for the Soul Blight range in Age of Sigmar, the idea that if you buy a set you're going to get duplicates of models you potentially have already, I think just giving having the set of card and the rules, and then you get the miniatures you need for it if you need to get them, is a much better approach. Because I think with Blackstone Fortress, some of the sets, like the one which had the Nurgle Marines in it and the Poxwalkers, people didn't really like that set. So like, you can get those miniatures 10 a penny, or we've already got them from like a 40k starter set. So I think GW has learned from that mistake. Yeah.
I mean, I have so many miniatures I can proxy that I'm not too worried about it. But I can understand people wishing that there was like some new, cool, unique miniatures that were in here, or something like that. But I think that if the price is right on this, I think it'd be a pretty cool Cursed City expansion. I'm excited. I mean,
it's interesting because also that leads to the issue that some people have with the sets that come in Warhammer Quest, is that the miniatures are like kind of locked within that game, so you can't get them anywhere else. So and we're going to get onto this when we talk about Kill Team in a second. So also coming out for Soulbound is Era of the Beast, which gives us new archetypes and more information about basically what the mortal realms are like in the era of the beast and Kragnos, and so we get all of that information reframed for the RPG, so that's cool. So for example, there's Knight Relictors, there's Mulusai, so they're the Gorgon-esque, Medusa-esque Daughters of Cain warriors that you can now play as, which is going to be horrific. And also playable dragons are going to be in there, so you can play as a dragoneth, which is interesting. Playable dragons,
perfect. Just what Soulbound needs.
Soulbound's ridiculous in its rule systems anyway. Like you're playing epic level characters. Blackened Earth is also coming up. That's a series of adventures set around grey water fastness. That's also in the realm of life. So we're really getting quite a lot of books now that are exploring lots of different places now within Age of Sigmar, because we've got this grey water fastness is realm of life. Ulfenkarn is realm of death. Era of the Beast and Excelsis is a city, so that's all to do with the realm of beasts. So we're really getting a bit of a tour around the mortal realms finally. And then miniatures wise, things that are interesting. Kill Team is just releasing like some sort of like annual, which means they're also releasing the Elucidon Starstriders and the Galapox finally, like as separate releases, and giving us rules for those in that annual. So about bloody time.
yeah, definitely. Chris, you pointed out that the Starstriders, who are rogue traders in 40k, they will pair very nicely with the new Imperial Navy Breach team, also in Kill Team. And then you get those guys, maybe like an Argus Lander or something like that, and you've got a cool little Warhammer 40,000 force, which I'm tempted. I shouldn't do it though.
The problem I'm going to say is, let me just check which one is it. It's book. I think it's book 2. I think it's Octarius book 2. So, the book to get the Elucidon Starstriders in, or at least the Rogue Trader rule for 40k, they're detailed in the Warzone Octarius book 2 called Critical Mass. The problem is you can't take it's pretty hard to field a vanguard force, or even any force like in the way you would want to. You can't really field a fully just rogue trader force, which is really annoying. For whatever reason, I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at it. So you can have crusade armies, and them as it's something like you can have a rogue trader lead an army, but you can't take Voidsman crew as a troops option in your main battalion, or whatever the hell it's called. In the force organization chart. It's not great. So I really hope with the new Kill Team stuff coming out with the Breachers, they might look at this and reassess that. I mean, honestly, just forget point systems and whether it's legal or not, and do narrative, and just go, look, I've got a rogue trader army.
Right.
Just do that. It's fun. It'll be fun.
Yep, that's what I would want to do. But yeah,
I've got rogue traders for exactly that reason. I've got the Starstriders, and you can add on, if you've got Blackstone Fortress, you can add on a few characters from that to make your rogue trader away team really eclectic.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's some cool options, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think temporarily you could just use like Imperial Guardsmen as your troops choice or something. Just mod them up.
That's what I would do.
Convert them to be like have gas masks on, or EVA suits, something like that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Moving on to Age of Sigmar, that new Bellacor's champion, the Eternus model, is very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting throwback to the original Age of Sigmar starter set. So that's pretty neat. He's a kind of chaosified version of I think the character's name was Hammerhand, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that's pretty neat.
There's something weird going on where I think with the storm that Be'lakor unleashed, that was preventing Stormcast returning when they die. I think there's something weird to do with how he's basically siphoning away those souls and essentially, I guess, reforging them in his own way into these corrupted entities. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Also, Bellacor's got his own warband for Warcry. I can't remember what they're called. They look really different to regular slaves to slaves to darkness and chaos warriors. So that's all good. And then, of course,
definitely good stuff.
We've got more Votan. We've seen lots and lots of the Votan, our squats, more vehicles, more troops. Some of the stuff I like, some other little bits like the floating robots I'm not so keen on. But I think again, it's just a new faction. They're quite interesting. I know some people like them, some people dislike them for the look of them, but that's always going to happen. Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes down to the paint scheme, because they gave him this kind of sleek white kind of apple brutalism. But if you go with a different, darker paint scheme, or maybe something a bit grungier, like they've been mining, or in some kind of dirty environments, maybe some Martian dust like the Skitarii have, I think they'll look pretty great. So I think once they're out and totally available, people are going to be pretty excited about it.
Yeah. And I think that's really all the releases that have been worth highlighting. So we can go on to the main topic, which is Nurgle. Right. Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and despair and really all horrible things to do with rotting and illness and he's an interesting chaos god. So we're not going to cover the origins in Warhammer and Age of Sigmar because essentially they're the same as what we've covered already for Khorne. Essentially, chaos is this primeval force that was unleashed on the old world through the Chaos Gates, and then later on in Age of Sigmar, of course, the Chaos Gods return and take over the All Points and turn it into turn it into part of the realm of chaos. But to begin and talk about where Nurgle kind of awakens within the 40k universe, we kind of need to think about what Nurgle is and what that god kind of represents. So, of the 4 chaos gods, of the 4 ruinous powers, Nurgle is in fact the third to have awakened in the 40k universe. So that gives you an idea of where Nurgle's power kind of lies. Nurgle is often looking at the long game, and the power kind of waxes and wanes as with illness, sweeps through the lands of whichever realms the god is trying to influence. And Nurgle's interesting to compare and think about why Nurgle exists, because Nurgle, the chaotic element of why Nurgle exists is it's about the despair related to death. It's the rampant corruption that occurs due to life growing and mutating and rotting and decaying. That is things that humans can't have trouble kind of, and mortals have trouble kind of comprehending. So that puts Nurgle in a position that's quite different to Nagash and Mor and other gods of death within the 40k universe, where death is part of the cycle, but it's a process that is meant to occur and in its allotted time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We'll get into some more comparisons later, but Nurgle being the opposite of the chaos god Tzeentch, Nurgle isn't actually stasis. He is in a cycle. However, it's confined in that way. It is a confined cycle as opposed to the more constant change of Tzeentch, which I think is kind of interesting, because some people think that it's about stasis, but it's really not. And also, yes, quite different than Nagash.
Oh yeah, very different. So yeah, Nurgle then also, it's important to point out, is not just about death, but it is also about life, and I think it's where those two things meet, and it's the bit in between, which is where Nurgle really flourishes, which is when life and death meet and creates that kind of horrible thing in between, which is that decay, that slow march from one end to the other, and also the weird way that life blooms out of the rot. And I guess in that respect, it makes Nurgle has a lot of nuance in this, because the reason why people turn to Nurgle, we'll get to this, is because they are looking for an escape from that cycle, much in the way they turn to Nagash for a way to escape that cycle. But I think the rationale is quite different, because in some respects, Nagash is about death eternal. Nurgle is not about death eternal. Nurgle is about the churn of life through death, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
And then in the 40k universe, we'll get and we can get more into what Nurgle is about. It's interesting because Nurgle arises when basically awakens when mankind is being plagued by lots and lots and lots of rampant diseases, and humanity has no way of fighting back against it, and falls to despair and turns to other depravities to kind of fend off illness. And so that's around about, I would say, is around about the Middle Ages. So we're talking medieval into, I guess, early Renaissance era, when you've got the Black Death is racing through England, Europe, again in Venice and other places. And then also you could relate it to how the colonial powers brought disease to the New World, and therefore it ran rampant through the indigenous peoples there. And so all that pain and despair coalesces as humans, being the have such psychic potential, coalesces in the warp to create Nurgle. And really, the reason that has to be humans causing that is because orcs obviously don't give a damn and are a hardy species that have no fear of death as well. Remember, they have no fear of death, and therefore have no fear of entities such as Nightbringer of the Necrons. But also the Eldari are also blessed with longevity and vitality. So like disease to them is not a thing. So really humans are Nurgle's favourite children. Because we're so blighted by these things and so desperate to be free of them. So I guess we'll talk about what Nurgle is about. Mike, where do you want to go? You want to dig into this?
Sure, absolutely. So Nurgle has many aspects. And the primary ones that we focus on in the Warhammer games usually is death, despair, rebirth. And, through the chaos of life, there's a way to experience rot, disease, viruses, and mutation. So despite the grotesque and the despair of death, you can have a strange life that's born out of the rotting remains. And Nurgle is considered pretty jolly as other gods go, and revels in each new disease and profane life form. So you can see that has this, usually decay aspect. When you look at in Warhammer 40,000, say the Death Guard, and the Plague Marines, who are kind of just these rotting corpses shuffling along in the battlefields. And also we'll get into some of the cults as well, in say Warhammer, the Old World, and also Soulbound as well. And despite Nurgle reveling in decay and rot, really all life is cherished by Nurgle, because these are all vessels for that cycle that we mentioned of life and death, and that's what this god is tied to. And no matter their status, all beings die, wither, and rot, and Nurgle is an equal opportunist seeking the decay of society. But we kind of focus right there on some of the negative aspects of Nurgle, but interestingly, he does have many positive aspects. We didn't really discuss this with Khorne, but I think it's really interesting to talk about that with Nurgle, because Nurgle also covers, in some ways, the domain of family and love. There's a reason why players call him Papa Nurgle, and in the universe, in some of the settings, Grandfather Nurgle is sometimes used as his name, because Nurgle represents not only being an ultimate equalizer with life and death, but also an egalitarian and almost supportive family, until, of course, you die horribly. And I think that's one of the really interesting things. We mentioned that he's jolly, and Nurgle seems to take a positive interest in many of his followers in a way that the thirsting, laughing gods of Khorne and Slaanesh may not, or the fickle Tzeentch probably wouldn't either. At least no true interest and support. And compared to Tzeentch, his usual enemy, his opposite in the pantheon of chaos, Nurgle prefers his creations to grow and fester and rot. And you know, life is rampant for sure, but not compared to the unfettered mercurial change of Tzeentch. The eternal flame that he is, and what Tzeentch prefers. And of course, Tzeentch burning everything is not conducive to the fostering of new plagues. Another cool thing to bring up with Nurgle is that, just like we mentioned with Khorne last time, many of the old world gods may actually be narrow aspects of some of the chaos gods. If we take a quick look at Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, it's plausible that gods like Shalia or Raya or Tal fall within Nurgle's domains. And intriguingly, and this is a bit different than what you mentioned with 40k, those three gods are some of the oldest in the human pantheon. So I would actually counter that maybe Nurgle is even maybe the earliest god that might have existed in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay universe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nurgle is a really, really curious being within the setting, because there's that element of like Nurgle isn't just. When you have that comparison to say Nagash or other death gods, Nurgle isn't about that finality. People are just scared of the finality that Nurgle's gifts lead you to, which is where kind of, I guess, the hubris comes from, because obviously Nurgle's ultimate gift, and we'll go on to this, is to release people from that cycle. Which leads us really into talking about the worshippers of Nurgle. So, as you can expect, the worshippers of Nurgle are afflicted with disease and illness, and ultimately they, through the temptations that are put before them, wish to see a way of becoming free from the pain of life, almost, free from the pain of these diseases, free from them. So these diseases, these plagues, these afflictions, these blights are gifts to them if they can endure them long enough to become so faithful to Nurgle that then the final gift is the being freed from the pain of them. So that's really interesting, because I guess philosophically, and this is why we get to why Nurgle is jolly and his followers could be portrayed as quite jolly folks, because they understand all things die and all things then are reborn in some way. They kind of grasp onto that gift of life and live it to its fullest, which puts them very different to, again, if we compare to Nagash and his followers, and whether in Warhammer Fantasy or in Age of Sigmar, they are so desperate not to die. They want to be free of death completely. They want to they want to be undead. Whereas Nurgle, I think, is different about you're not even going to die, because if you think about it, the most bloated, corrupted figures of Nurgle's followers never die. They're just walking, bloated, slimy, fleshy things, but they haven't died.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing. In all of the Warhammer universes, Nurgle wants there to be life because ultimately, being one of these primeval chaos gods, he needs to feed off of the psyker and warp energy of living beings. So he needs that to exist. Now, in Age of Sigmar and also Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay as well, the Nagash and the undead are really diametrically opposed to all the chaos gods, because they seek to have a world without life or just undeath, and that is probably one of the worst fates for the chaos gods, because if I remember correctly, vampires well, vampires do have magic, so that's interesting. They can harness the winds of magic, but certainly skeletons, zombies, and the like, they don't have any sort of influence on or worship of the gods around them. And in the context of Warhammer 40,000, I guess the Necrons, they probably don't have any sort of a psychic impact on the warp, do they?
No.
So
They were never a psychically empowered
yeah.
race.
Oh,
They
indeed, that's right. That's right, because the war in heaven and all of that was really predating the Chaos Gods, wasn't it?
yeah.
So, that's that's an interesting thing to point out, that a galaxy that's overtaken by the Necrons would be a
It'd be
terrible
terrible.
fate to
Remember
for the
what the
Chaos
Necrons,
Gods.
because the Necrons' ultimate goal, because obviously there's been a lot of retcons about the Catan and everything.
Right.
The Necrons' ultimate goal is to reverse what they did to become Necrons. So they want to take over the galaxy and do all the relevant research and gain all the biomass, all the biomaterial that's required
Mhm.
to recreate their mortal bodies. Hence why they also
Indeed.
fucking hate the Tyranids, because the Tyranids are
Yeah.
obviously
Competition.
a competition on that front. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the Chaos Gods would see that having the all of the peoples of the 40k galaxy turned into just mulch to create a race that is not even psychically active would
Mm.
really fuck off the Chaos Gods.
Yeah. And theoretically, they'd want to change the galaxy back to how it was before their
Yeah,
downfall in the War of Heaven.
they want to
So,
use the Noctilith and the pylons and so forth to seal the warp away from the material universe.
yeah. So
Hmm.
ultimately, that side tangent says Nurgle doesn't like the undead,
No.
or anything like that, necromancers or necrons or anything like that.
And then also the interesting thing to say about with Nurgle, then Nurgle is also, I mean, Zinch is a great mastermind of playing games and intrigue, because obviously it's all about seeing fate and manipulating it. Whereas Nurgle, I think, is very much less not about manipulating fate, but it's almost like the inevitability of where things lead to. So is always about the long game. Things
Mm.
ultimately rot, things fall apart, everything dies, and everything's reborn. So even within society of the cults, those worshippers are going to be playing that long game. Tainting, planting the seeds to taint food stock. It may even just be giving out the few seeds which are corrupted to farmers, which grow putrid, putrid harvests of like pumpkins and
Yeah.
or tainting the water and so forth. And of course, that's and of course, obviously, if we want to get really horrible, there are plenty of illnesses and diseases, especially in the Warhammer, in the in reality and also in these fantasy settings, which are not so visible, and you could almost say are the diseases of the upper classes. So again, you can see how they can taint even high society, who then, because they've been afflicted, become so desperate to be free of those diseases, or at least free of the pain of those diseases, turn to Nurgle.
Mm. Yeah, there's a good character like that in the Matthias Thulman Witch Hunter books. Yeah, very
Hmm.
similar.
What else can we say about Nurgle? While Nurgle mostly we don't consider to be a war god, um, sees the benefit of how conflicts and war are essentially crucibles for illness and viruses to spread. You only have to look at the real world with like the Spanish flu. An event
Right.
like that for Nurgle is perfect. And we will get some of that kind of feeling with Darktide when that comes out, because from what we know from the videos is that the Mobian Sixth, I think that's the name of the Imperial Guard regiment in that game, have gone off and fought some war and come back, and they're tainted by chaos. They're tainted by Nurgle. So
Mm.
there's a whole thing there. that game's going to be great when it comes out because it's going to be wall to wall Nurgle cultists and
Cool.
and monstrosities, and then I guess again coming back to like Nurgle and life and family, viruses of illnesses and viruses and afflictions like that are very good for sifting the weak from the strong, because you've got that kind of Darwinian kind of element to it. So is Nurgle the great Darwinian equalizer? That's a terrifying thought to think about. Is Nurgle a good person? I don't know. We can't say Nurgle's a good person, but still,
no. I think we can pretty much say no.
No,
but interesting,
rough.
Interesting individual, interesting cults as well.
Yeah. Any particular cults that you are or anything within that has stood out?
Yeah. So one that's always stood out to me, of course, I think this is my first one that I really saw, was the Carnival of Chaos in Mordheim.
Of course.
Yeah, and that was an interesting one. Because usually they focus so much on like the disease and like the the horrible, evil demons and all that kind of stuff. But the Carnival of Chaos is just a joyous carnival that rolls into town. All the townsfolk show up and they're all excited. And they walk away from the carnival after having a grand old time with some sort of a vile gift. And this is usually some sort of a disease or anything like that, which they then go and spread throughout their community. And there's really cool. There's actually a comic book, and that's, or I think the story originated from, and then that turned into miniatures that you could play in Mordheim, which was pretty neat.
They were really good miniatures as well.
Yeah, definitely. It had the little stagecoach that you could bring around the battlefield and stuff. Awesome.
And the
awesome stuff.
The plague bearer that had doing the kind of Hamlet kind of look was just amazing.
Yeah, they had a lot of fun with those kinds of like fanatic and specialist game stuff back in the day, and still do. Other stuff, of course, Warhammer 40,000. The standard bearers of Nurgle are, of course, the Death Guard. That being one of the original legions that fought in the Horus Heresy and turned to Nurgle and were totally infested. I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I believe the story was that they got trapped in the warp and the Death Guard were going to die. And made a pact with Nurgle to survive.
So Typhus, or Typhon at the time, he already was corrupted to chaos, and so like even further, so made that kind of pact and trapped the ship, the fleet in the warp, and so they were afflicted by Nurgle's gifts, and not out of choice really. Mortarion, like, because the Legion had always been on a world that had like diseases and plagues, and so they saw it as a sign of strength that they could withstand such things. So again, it's that hubris of they thought they could withstand everything, and then Nurgle's like, wait, you haven't seen anything yet, and just ravaged the entire fleet and Legion with the disease. And of course, not everyone, there are some notable Death Guard warriors who escaped that fate because they stayed loyal to the Emperor and basically formed the foundation of the let me think, either the Grey Knights, or they formed the foundation of the Death Watch, I think.
Garo was he started the Inquisition. With a Sister of Silence and some other guy.
Garo's
I've never finished. Yeah, I've never finished those stories because there's a bunch of audiobooks and stuff that you have to get for the Horus Heresy, and I haven't gotten to that yet. But Garo's a pretty good character. I'll mention him later.
And we should also say that not all Plague Marines are Death Guard, because obviously other Marines can be corrupted to Nurgle and become Plague Marines eventually.
Correct. Definitely. And then I don't know too much about them, but Chris, do you know much about the Maggot kin for Age of Sigmar? Because they seem to have some really cool.
Because we've got those big kind of bloated Chaos Warriors, haven't we? And they've got some really strange mutations. I haven't really read up on them much. That's a good point. Maybe we'll return to that when we do do some more at some point. What obviously has interested me in Age of Sigmar is the fact that, because I recently got, I still yet to put any of it together and paint it, so busy, is the new Warcry starter set, and that has one of the war bands in that is the Rotmire Creed, and they're quite a curious group. So the Rotmire Creed started off as a group of alchemists in the city of Excelsis in Gairan, and they were seeking to try and learn how to prevent all diseases. But of course, in their hubris, they and Nurgle, saw they were open to corruption. This order, known as the Purifiers originally, started performing some really awful experiments, and eventually were corrupted. And in their quest for the filtre of immortality, so they then had to flee and were chased to the Rotmire swamps, which are north of the Gnarlwood, and there they continue their alchemy, trying to search for this ultimate immortality. But they make like these large effigies, these totems. So they make these totems, these fleshy totems. They put rotting flesh onto them, and then kind of sculpt them to look like their Lord Leech. So this big kind of, I guess, tubular kind of totem with two horns at the end of it, so it looks kind of leech-like. And around the bottom base of this totem is a basin in which all the putrid, decaying fluids gather, and they kind of perform their alchemy in. Yeah, they're fucking awful. The miniatures are great, but they're gross. They're really gross. There are other names for Nurgle within Age of Sigmar. He's known as the King of All Flies, Mother Mort, Neaglin, or Ongal, or the Rusting Patriarch. So again, the thing that Warcry's done quite well, and I think Age of Sigmar's doing quite well, is showing us how across the mortal realms the Chaos Gods are venerated in various different aspects.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember that in Realms of Chaos, which is a pretty old Warhammer book, there was a little side note that hinted that some healers in the Warhammer Fantasy Old World will actually pray to Nurgle to assist in the healing sometimes. If it's really desperate and they can't heal them, sometimes they do that, which I thought was an interesting.
That's a bit of a Faustian kind of deal going on.
Indeed. Yep.
Nurgle goes, oh, I'll help you with that one at no cost. Help you with that one, no cost. Help you with that one, no cost. And then it's like, oh, you want me to help with this one? Right. Well, now,
Yep.
The accounts have to be balanced, and the price is you are going to unleash disease on everyone, or perhaps all those people that priest of Sharla's or whoever has healed. There's a slow burn disease in those I say victims, but they would have been patients at the time. Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah, that's actually a good plot for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. There's an outbreak in a town of one of those like scarlet fevers, one of those other Warhammer
the
diseases.
Bloody Flux.
Yeah, exactly. And there's only one healer there, and they seem to be able to heal. They're desperately doing that. Maybe a devotee to Shalia or someone else. And of course, the adventurers get there, and they eventually find out that the one who caused the entire epidemic was the healer himself. So that could be a very interesting little mystery to unravel. And then, of course, you have to figure out what you're going to do with them, because they are healing. They are the only person in town, the only person within 100 leagues who can save the people. But they clearly have made a pact with the dark and thirsting gods.
The other thing we can definitely say is that we didn't really cover this with the Skaven, but for certain, Skaven have an affinity to Nurgle, and which clan is it? Clan Pestilin will definitely be. And this gets us to a side thing, and we'll come back to this when we talk about other Chaos God entities. But clearly, the great horned rat has aspects of all the Chaos Gods to a certain extent, or at least some of them, and there's a good dose of Nurgle in there for certain.
Yep.
Right. Do we want to cover role playing as Nurgle, or should we just cover quickly the demons of Nurgle? Because that's also a fun thing.
Well, I think the one point I want to get across for role playing the followers of Nurgle is that don't just make it about disease. Look at some of those other aspects and kind of play with that, because I think it's going to be more interesting. And if you're a storyteller, dungeon master, game master, whatever, that's going to throw your players off a little bit. What if the Nurgle cult is something more like multi-level marketing or something like that? This is a group that you can join, and as you get higher and higher up, get to the top. Well, that's when you start getting Papa Nurgle's gifts. And of course, in those kinds of things, you never want to talk about anything negative. You always want to be positive, say everything's great, I love being up here at the top, everything's good. But then deep down there's festering boils, other things, or maybe some other kind of a pact.
I just thought of a really good one that goes back to the Carnival of Chaos, because Carnival of Chaos get away with what they're doing, because when they arrive at a town village and they do their fair, their festival, their performance, there's a glamour, so you can't see what they truly are. So a cult like that within high society that's leading like grand balls, carnivals, again getting that kind of like faux Venetian thing, and people want to be a part of this because it looks so good. And then once you're there and you're being depraved and you're eating the luxurious food, or you're getting your kicks with the lovely ladies and gentlemen who are there, but then in the end, when the glamour's gone and you realize, you've been eating rotting flesh, and you've got horrible tumorescent boils and things on your body from venereal diseases and things. It could get pretty gross.
That's a great idea. Mask of the Red Death, but
basically,
but with a very different ending. That could be very interesting. Yeah. Huh.
I like it. Also, harvest festivals gone wrong also fits into this. You can definitely see the rot setting into the grain, and of course we know that that's potentially the origin of why when you get these funguses that are in the grain, they and people eat it, it can cause hallucinations or various other illnesses. That would be really good in a Nurgle kind of
that's a great idea.
Story.
Yeah, actually, a visionary aspect to Nurgle could be pretty interesting as well, using ergot and other kind of things. That's a great idea.
Also, what about mushrooms? Mushrooms grow on dead. Going back to one of my favorite, because it's gross, episodes. It's like literally episode 3 of the Hannibal TV series, and there's a serial killer that buries people, but he puts them into like a coma, because I think they're diabetic, so he puts them into a diabetic coma, so they're still alive, buried, and grows upon them mushrooms, because he sees the beauty of that rebirth. And mushrooms feel very Nurgle, so that could be revolting. Again, you get into that philosophy of death leading to life.
Probably should have put a content warning on this episode.
Oh, there's always content warnings on anything
definitely
with the Chaos
always
Gods.
in Darkhammer.
Always content warnings. But that would, we need to play some more Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I think we need to, or someone else needs to run it. I want to play. Anyway, but yeah, you're right. There's all of those things that we just talked about. It means it's not just about the poisoning of the well, or it's the look, the Chaos Cultists are lepers, or the equivalent. Like that's too derivative and boring. There, you can really drill down into this. Into the extremities almost of the philosophy of whether they're living life to its fullest, or they're nihilistic and they want to see society crumble because something should be reborn from it that might be better.
Here's a great idea for another. This could be any of them. Age of Sigmar, 40k, Warhammer Fantasy. The nobility are the ones that are basically extolling disease. They're the Nurgle cultists. They're extolling diseases on the population, and it's basically the lepers of society who are the ones that finally realize and have to basically rise up, because they used to be, maybe a bureaucrat, or an actuary, an accountant, working with some of them were working with the nobility. Others are just, unfortunate individuals, but then they get cast out as basically lepers, if you will, and they are the ones that can actually, realize what's truly going on in this city. I think that could be a really good basis for an adventure too, or for a one shot certainly. All right, so let's go for that bonus round of Nurgle Demons. All right, this is gonna be rapid fire because we have been going a little bit late here. So round one, let's talk about it. Nurglings. They're adorable, little, mischievous, rotund demons. Got little arms, little legs, giant mouths, slobbering tongues. And these little guys, sometimes they become such big fans of a champion of Nurgle that they actually live inside his or hers gaping wounds. And also, there's now a plushie you can buy from Games Workshop, so that's pretty fun.
Nurglings,
but yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, mischievous little creatures. They usually there's giant gaggles of them running around either the battlefield or maybe just scurrying around the city. Another good idea, just prankster Nurglings in your town, right? And then the rat catcher and the others have to go try to chase them down.
Just reminded me, because there's a Warhammer Fantasy scenario from 2nd edition, I think, called "Sing for Your Supper." Go look for that. It's totally about Nurgle. I'm not going to say anything more. It's great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Plague bearers as well. They're the rank and file demons. They're infested with hideous diseases. Their swords are also infesting others when they slash them. They're not that interesting. They look cool.
Oh no, plague bearers are interesting. Really? How they get birthed into the universe.
Whoa! I don't know anything about this. All right, hit me with it.
So a person that is afflicted with Nurgle's rot, or whichever particular disease of Nurgle, it drives them to such despair. It prepares their soul to be a gateway for a plague bearer to erupt through their body.
Oh, that's really.
It's really fucking gross.
That's really Warhammer right there. Okay, right. I take it back. Plague bearers are pretty dope. Okay, next up, the Beasts of Nurgle. Okay, Beasts of Nurgle are horrible, disgusting creatures. They're like legged slugs almost. And then they frolic across planets, oblivious to the destruction that they wreak. And their tails are always wagging, and then they like to run up to an individual and then slobber all over them with a horrible, plague-ridden, diseased, slimy tongue.
Yeah.
They're basically puppies. Evil, horrible puppies. And they're great. And then we, of course, have the Great Unclean One, who looks like a giant Nurgling, but is actually, crafted in the image of Papa Nurgle himself. And while this is a giant, horrific monster on the battlefield, what I think really sets the Great Unclean One apart from other greater demons, is actually their compassion, right? So these fiends laud the exploits of mortals and demons in their army and considers all of them to be their children. So it's a demon with an emotional side.
Yeah. I was also going to mention of other interesting things. The feculent Gnarlmore, which is basically is it a bit of terrain? Is it a monster? But this is essentially and this relates to Gyran. Essentially, it's trees that grow up and they, spew, belch clouds of demonic spores and shed wet blossom to carpet the maggot-churned earth beneath their boughs. So they're just horrible demonic trees that grow around and, nasty. They've got big maws in them. They eat people. And yeah, horrible. I was just looking at the Games Workshop website of other horrible demons. There's I think we've covered all of them. I mean, there's the plague drones, the big bugs.
Yeah. There's some new ones that like the maggot can have, and the the Nurgle demons in Warhammer 40,000 as well. I don't know those too well. I just want to go for the classics right here. But there's some other stuff you can check out now because they have been expanding it, especially since Demons of Chaos have their own codex and RE book now. And then let's do real quick some Black Library recommendations. For Horus Heresy, Warhammer 30,000, I really like Flay of the Eisenstein, actually. Some people don't like it that much, but it's kind of a cool story about a bunch of Death Guard, including Garo, trying to escape from the Istvan III massacre. to get information back to Terra about what is going on, the betrayal that has occurred. And of course, there are some corrupted Death Guard on there that they have to deal with on their way back. So
Garrow is the ultimate badass, isn't he?
Some people really don't like him. Some people, I think he's pretty cool, but I've only read that one book. But he's a goodie. He's a goodie. And I hear he goes on a lot of other pretty cool adventures later on. I don't really know if there's any good 40k books about Death Guard and the like. I know like Word Bearers and Black Legion have gotten some pretty awesome novels and coverage. I definitely check out Realm of Fire episodes because Brendan's really into Death Guard and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think he's mentioned some of that kind of fiction in the past. And then for Warhammer Fantasy, but this is also totally applicable to Age of Sigmar, is the novel Palace of the Plague Lord by C.L. Werner. This is another novel set in Norsca and the Chaos Wastes, where a tribesman is manipulated by both Khorne and Tzeentch into assaulting a fortress in Nurgle. And it's cool because it shows a lot of different aspects of chaos worship in different tribes up in Norsca, other than what you see with like cults in the Empire and the like. So I think it's pretty neat for that reason, and that's why it's so applicable to Age of Sigmar as well, because there's so much room in that setting to just put in like a tribe of humans that have turned to chaos and the like, or maybe beastmen as well. And that's what I got.
Cool. Well, I think that's a good overview of Nurgle and how to really, if you're going to play people who, for whatever reason, have or role play with the GM, role play the servants of Nurgle, to get into the mindset of it and how it's quite different to say if you were a follower of like Nagash or the other Chaos Gods. And there's just a lot you can explore of it, and a lot of different plots that span different parts of society, whether it's the 40k universe or whether it's Warhammer or Age of Sigmar. I think there's lots to look at there. A lot of mileage to get, and then it's just I think I don't know. Is it my favorite Chaos God? I mean, I used to have a Warhammer Fantasy Nurgle Chaos Warrior army.
Really?
So
cool.
Yeah, I painted up back in the day the Harbinger of Decay model, which you can right now go on Games Workshop as on demand one.
Nice,
it's the dude
nice.
on the necrotic steed with the big scythe. But I also converted Nightbringer to be a demon prince for my Chaos army.
Oh, cool.
So you just had to put enough green stuff to make him look like he's got a rotting cloak and you can't see and a big hood, and obviously had a scythe. So that was a dead easy conversion. But that was that was when I was working at Games Workshop. So that's like that's like 20 years ago.
Yeah. One thing I did back in the day was I had this idea to have a Beasts of Chaos Nurgle army, which would second as my zombies for my vampire counts. And I did build a bunch of those guys. So basically had the zombie units done, but I never actually made the full Beasts of Chaos army in that regard. But it was a good idea at the time.
I'm always so close to wanting to collect a pure kind of Nurgle demon army, because it's just it just looks like a lot of fun to paint. It's just like blast it white and then, some shades, some contrast paints.
Yeah, definitely.
Paint a big Great Unclean one. It's a lot of fun. And also Horticulus Slimux is a great model. That's the dude on the slug, on the snail, sorry, which is just
cool.
All pure comical fun.
I think it's interesting with Nurgle that, a lot of people go for that kind of greenish color as like the overall scheme of the army, but you can really experiment. You could have like kind of a black and blue kind of bruised color if you want to give them that, and you can experiment definitely and go for other things. A rash color of red.
And the other great thing is the other cool thing, which is that's surely out to pre-order, isn't it? As we said, is for Kill Team and they're back is the Galapox, who are just bizarre models, and I really hope there's some good tie-in models to Darktide that come out, so we get to see some heretic, traitor guard, but are obviously Nurgle tainted rather than the traitor guard that we've seen from Kill Team so far and from Blackstone Fortress. Yeah, there's loads of cool stuff going on. Yeah, Dark Tide's going to be wall to wall, Nurgle, and there's going to be a lot of fun from that. So, yeah, I think that's the episode done. Next time, do we want to cover Slaanesh or do we want to cover... let's cover Tzeentch. I think Slaanesh we need to kind of like really ease ourselves into that one.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And because Tzeentch is usually considered to be one of the older Chaos gods, I think that's fine. Slaanesh is the new kid on the block, comparatively.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll cover Tzeentch next time. Look at that glorious bastard, and yeah, if you've been listening to this, go back and listen to the other episodes of Darkhammer. There are plenty there covering all various different topics of the Warhammer Warhammer RPGs. Listen to Realm of Fire for stuff about more wargaming. I'm sure we will talk more once I'm back actually playing some games, and I've got my car and I've passed my driving test, so I can go down to Warhammer Worlds and play some games there. That is the plan. That is the dream. And we have, and then obviously, if you're interested in freelancing and getting into writing of RPGs, Crystal has been putting out episodes for her series of that on Dark Days Radio. So there's some fantastic advice there. I need to catch up on them. So there's lots and lots of good content coming out from us, and I think we're all itching to do some streamed RPGs at some point. It's just getting everyone prepared. I think when you're getting kitchens ripped out, or you're moving house, or other things, we're just too busy, aren't we? We're all too busy. But we'll be back soon, with more Dark Days Radio and Darkhammer, and soon it is on the horizon. It will be coming soon. Will be Dark Iron. So when we have more plans for that, we will get back to you on that front as well. So thanks again, Mike, for adding notes to this and adding your perspective and joy about Nurgle.
Of course.
And we'll speak to you all again soon. So goodbye for now.
Yeah, take it easy and have a good night.